Well, I came across an interesting article on Torrent Freak this weekend, and that is Nintendo is suing two ROM, I guess, aggregation sites called LoveRoms and LoveRetro.com. And it wasn't just the fact that they were suing them, but for how much money Nintendo wanted. This is shocking. Nintendo wanted, according to the article, statutory damages of $150,000 per infringing game, Nintendo game, I guess, game originally developed and produced by Nintendo, and up to $2 million for each trademark infringement. The authors of the article suggests that based on what was on these sites, and again, these sites have actually been taken down, whoever ran these two sites would have to pay Nintendo $100 million. And in the ensuing discussion board posts about this, you had the two traditional arguments. Nintendo is a douchebag company for doing this. We want to preserve the games. And then, of course, people who say, well, it's their intellectual property, and they have a right to do it. And whenever I see these debates, my thought is, well, you know what? You're both right. These are Nintendo intellectual properties, all of these games. And Nintendo has a right to sue. They have a right to ask for whatever they want to ask for. They have a right to pursue the people running these sites. And yet, at the same time, what they are doing is really an assault on their fan base. A couple of issues around this that I think are important to highlight. And I've said this in some other videos and in some other contexts. The way that you combat piracy is not to necessarily go after the pirating sites. Now, these sites may have been charging money for these games. I don't know. I've never used them or seen them. But even let's assume that they were charging money. What you need to do is outcompete the pirating sites. And Steam is a great example of this. I've said many times, I remember mid-2000s, a friend of mine introduced me to what a torrent was, and all this software and games. And then I discovered Steam, and Steam was easier to use. The games were reasonably priced. Everything was all in one place. And since then, I've never even thought to look at a torrent site again. Steam was just better and reasonable. Now, what Nintendo is going to do, and I suspect that what they're doing here, is trying to put an infrastructure in place to distribute their old games through this online service that they're apparently launching. And I haven't really followed the news on that lately, but I assumed, or I'm working under the assumption based on what I've read before, that that's kind of like a PlayStation Plus, where they're going to throw you a couple old school games per month, and then I don't know if they're going to take them away. But the fact that, that Nintendo has to realize is that their back catalog, not just their titles, but all of the titles on the NES, SNES, and so forth, represent a major opportunity for them to cater to the retro crowd. Why is it that people are going to these websites and downloading these ROMs? Because these are great games, and the fact that Nintendo was charging $7.99 for Super Mario World, which, I have on, on disc, which I have the cartridge. I'm not going to pay $7.99 for the luxury of playing it with save states. I'm just going to go and download it. Or the super rare game. Maybe you don't want to pay $200 for an Earthbound cart. So you just go and download it. What Nintendo, and I've said this so many times, should do is come up with a service, as part of their Switch service, or maybe as like a $2 or $3 per month add-on. Give us back catalog access to everything on the NES and Super NES to start, and build a service. I always thought it kind of looks like, a Nintendo Power. This great kind of colorful, lush catalog with information about the game, maybe speedrun videos, live streaming of these games, and then you can actually sort of click play and play yourself. Strategy guides, all of that stuff that presumably they still have, Let me read the Link to the Past strategy guide, if they were going to do Game Boy games. Or actually, that's not a Game Boy game, but, Link's, I remember the Link's Awakening strategy guide. Well, just a wonderful, wonderful strategy guide for a wonderful, wonderful game. Let me play that Let me refer to the strategy guide at the click of a button, something like that, so that if I'm paying $5 a month or $10 a month, I'm getting some value out of it. I'm getting an experience with emulation that I can't get by going to some website, riddled with advertising banners, maybe spyware, outcompete those sites. So instead of doing that, Nintendo's doing what a lot of big companies do these days. They are extracting a rent on their intellectual property. And again, it's their right to do it, but I think the problem with rent-seeking behavior that we're seeing these days is that it stifles innovation. In this case, it goes after people who are big fans of your company, and it's preventing you from doing something more creative and more productive with your own intellectual property. So, from my perspective, I don't have a Switch, and I said I'm not going to get a Switch until there's actually a few games that I'm really interested in, but I will never pay for whatever this service is. I don't need to pay $5 a month to play Ice Climbers and Excite Bike for the 4,000th time. So I think Nintendo, this is an example, some article or some commentator, I think, put it nicely. Seems like there are two parts of Nintendo that are at odds with each other. There's the legal department, there's the business analysts, and then there's the kind of creative team. And it always seems like their legal decisions, their business decisions with regard to online content, whether it's their YouTube program, is always trying to extract money and punish the fan base. Then you have the creative part that's trying to cater to that fan base. So I think Nintendo has to rectify those two aspects of their business. And plus, are you really going to get $100 million from some guy in Arizona running these sites? The time, the money, and the resources that Nintendo is putting in to this attack on the ROM websites could be better used to do something productive and creative, and something that nurtures and rewards their fan base for the loyalty of that fan base over now decades. Why punish the passion that exists out there instead of supporting it?